But in the end, I mean, like 24 hours before he was killed, he had basically lost it and said, I'm leaving the pro-Israel cause. And this is before he's going to go on a nationwide campus tour where he's going to be bombarded with questions about Israel. This could have been potentially disastrous for the Israel lobby and the cause of Israel in the United States to have its most important non-governmental Gentile asset actually criticizing or entertaining criticism of Israel at these gigantic kind of arena size events.
Max Blumenthal just revealed the truth about Charlie Kirk's final 48 hours following the revelation that he said in his own words that he had, quote, no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause. What does this mean when it comes to the Israel lobby, the circumstances of Charlie's murder, and surrounding events? Let's get Max's take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
And he said he's considering leaving the pro-Israeli cause. Your take on what has happened? Well, how do you find the situation with the Charlie Kirk's story?
Well, these new text messages, which were dated to, I think, 24 to 48 hours before he was killed, are bombshell. And they confirm everything that I've been reporting since I started reporting after his murder on the fact that he was beginning to become alienated by the Zionist billionaires who had made him who he was, who had fueled his rise, who had fueled his career. And so I went through this 3-part investigation, and in the 3rd part, finally landed on the name of one of his biggest donors who had built him up from the beginning, named Robert Shillman, who is not just an anti-Palestinian donor who donates heavily to Friends of the IDF and to the settlement enterprise in the occupied West Bank, but is an anti-Islam donor who's donated loads of money to Stephen Yaxley Lennon, aka Tommy Robinson, who's fueling a religious war in the UK, to the career of Laura Loomer, to Geert Wilders, figures who are hostile to Islam, period. And Robert Shillman was early on a big backer of Charlie Kirk, and he pulled out of a $2 million donation. This was, these rumors were going around in conservative circles, and I managed to confirm them by even getting Robert Shillman himself on the phone.
Yeah, this is true. Shillman presumably was the one that pulled a $2 million donation. This was corroborated by Tucker Carlson on a recent podcast, and this was part of that group exchange where, facing this, does Charlie Kirk try to ease the tensions with the Zionists and the Zionist donors, maybe counterbalance it with the idea of having a more pro-Zionist voice? No, he goes to saying, I'm thinking about inviting Candace Owens, and that's the way to pour fuel onto the fire raging from the Zionists against Turning Point USA at this point. And not only that, but he says, quote, I have no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause. Josh Hammer and 3 others that have been named so far were part of that text message group, including Andrew Colvett, Rabbi Wolicki, and Rob McCoy were privy to this, but Josh Hammer went on to celebrate Charlie as some pro-Israel martyr, hiding the truth and trying to torch people like Candace Owens, saying that she's just lying about Charlie's turn from Israel when he clearly did. This corroborates Max's reporting in every single way.
And then, Candace Owens begins a series of live streams. I mean, she had been live streaming about this from the beginning, entertaining not just the facts that, we've confirmed about Charlie Kirk having been alienated by pro-Israel donors, but, also various theories about his assassination. And she comes under heavy attack from many of the influencers who were around Charlie Kirk at the end from the Zionist world, who were pushing him to stay in line with Netanyahu, who were basically cutouts for Netanyahu, and who were feeding him talking points ahead of his next campus tour, knowing that he was going to be bombarded with critical questions about his support for Israel, and that he wasn't really particularly enthusiastic to answer them. And so Candace Owens gets attacked. Her credibility is being called into question, and figures like Josh Hammer, who is a Newsweek editor at large, sort of a enforcer for Netanyahu in the media, who is part of these small meetings with Charlie Kirk of less than 10 Zionist activists feeding him talking points all the way up to the end, says Candace Owens is a huge liar. None of this is true about Charlie Kirk leaving the fold. He was pro-Israel, ride or die to the very end.
And this is all over Josh Hammer's Twitter feed. Don't take it from me or Max. Go look at that. He says that over and over, copy and pasting some of those sentences of the kind that Max just recited there over and over. He said this repeatedly as people drag Candace Owens for daring to say that Charlie was turning against Israel. I wasn't even fully convinced because in, say, that Megyn Kelly interview, he was counterbalancing some of the frustrations that he had toward this donor class and toward the idea that his character would be questioned for, making minor criticisms of Israel. He also, denied the genocide in Gaza, repeated Hasbara lines about, hey, the pictures coming out of Gaza are propaganda. It's not starvation. That's just, Hamas being Hamas. But it does seem to be the case that this is a major blow to the narrative, that he remained towed to the line in the pro-Israel Zionist course, saying again, in his own words, I have no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause.
And then she drops the bomb. These text messages showing that Charlie Kirk was furious with Robert Shillman pulling out the $2 million because he wouldn't refuse to host Tucker Carlson, who's become very critical of Israel. And he said these Jewish donors are playing to the stereotypes. And after this, I'm done with the pro-Israel cause. He basically was threatening all of them because he felt blackmailed, as I reported, for hosting Tucker Carlson. And he said, if you keep it up, I'm going to bring Candace Owens back. So he was really losing it. Candace Owens got a hold of these texts. She released them. She did not reveal the names of all of the people in these chat groups, but one of them was indeed Josh Hammer. Now here's where it gets crazy. Josh Hammer on September 9th dredged up a Donald Trump tweet from 2013 calling for publicly executing, I think at the time he was calling for publicly executing drug dealers, but it just said if they're publicly executed, that will send a strong message. It's an old tweet. Josh Hammer just thought of it for some reason, and he tweets it out and quote tweets it based. That's really a cool thing to say.
Yeah, I mean, he's not lying. This is exactly what happened. Here's the tweet. This is just a screenshot of the tweet. It's technically not the tweet, but this is what he did. This Donald Trump tweet should be public execution for all to see. You will end this BS fast. Hammer says base. This is about 18 hours before Charlie Kirk was murdered in front of all of our eyes. I don't think that he's even tried to provide an explanation for this. Even in his long-winded explanation from about 6 hours ago, as of the time this is being recorded, he hasn't touched this. And honestly, I'm surprised that Josh Hammer even spoke up. He made some excuse like Charlie's words about leaving the pro-Israel cause was just frustration. This is utter spin, utter retardation. It's on the same lines as this is Qatari photoshopping, like some of the Zionists went with that first day. Or, Hamas paid for this, right? Or it's anti-Semitic to bring this up. All those preposterous explanations. This was not venting. This was an accurate reflection of Charlie Kirk, who entertained inviting Candace Owens. Would he want to do that if he had not turned against the pro-Israel cause, if he was not frustrated and finally had the end of us? No, Josh Hammer just continued to lie, and he won't admit it because he's a charlatan. He's a fraud. He's duplicitous. And guess what? He couldn't help but to try to promote his book on the coattails of his supposed friend's death. He couldn't help to talk about that to the media. The last thing Charlie said to me was how great my book was and that I was going to plug it on this tour. Nonsense. This guy's vile.
Why did he tweet that 24 hours before Charlie Kirk was publicly executed? I mean, he wasn't publicly assassinated. I don't have any evidence of Josh Hammer or the Israel lobby being involved in Charlie Kirk's assassination. It's just weird. And it's also highly dishonest of all of these figures, from Bill Ackman, the billionaire Netanyahu cutout, to Josh Hammer, to all these other figures around Charlie Kirk, to Netanyahu himself, who tried to claim his legacy, to still assert that Charlie Kirk wanted to support Israel all the way to the end when their own behavior is what alienated him. He wasn't exactly moved by the suffering of Palestinians. He was still tweeting out anti-Islam statements. He was probably still trying to hold on to Robert Shillman's money. But in the end, like 24 hours before he was killed, he had basically lost it and said, I'm leaving the pro-Israel cause. And this is before he's going to go on a nationwide campus tour where he's going to be bombarded with questions about Israel. This could have been potentially disastrous for the Israel lobby and the cause of Israel in the United States to have its most important non-governmental Gentile asset actually criticizing or entertaining criticism of Israel at these gigantic kind of arena size events.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And to be clear, I think it was something like 44 hours before his death where he actually said those words. And that is what pushed him over the top. It wasn't Israel's treatment of the Palestinians, as Max so appropriately says there, but he's right about it. And, Josh Hammer's continued to lie, and he's done it for his own personal ambitions to try to tarnish the actual legacy of his friend and turn him in the direction of his preferred side of this divide in the conservative movement that we're all seeing in front of our eyes, seeing that play out. That is what he cared about most in the days following his friend's death. It wasn't telling the truth. It certainly wasn't.
But we'll never know.
Yeah. Max, when it comes to Charlie Kirk and his movement, do you think that it seems that Israel somehow feels that they need to do something with the public opinion in the United States? It's not just about the Charlie Kirk and his movement. It's all about the media in the United States. What is at stake for Israel in the United States when it comes to media?
Well, this is the way Netanyahu understands it, and I guess most Israelis at this point, is that they can keep committing genocide and still hold on to the American public and the Western public in general by positioning themselves as the saviors of Western civilization. And it's just not working. I mean, if they would stop shredding children, shredding people, killing anywhere from 90 to 150 people and wounding hundreds every day, senselessly destroying cities, carrying out ethnic cleansing, which we all can see despite Twitter X's increasing efforts to censor everything we see.
Yeah, they just killed 150 people the other day after this Gaza peace plan was announced by President Trump. They don't care, and they know that they have leverage over the U.S. government. The U.S. government's not going to pull our aid toward them. If this deal goes into place and Netanyahu ramps up the bombing, unfurls, the biggest scale bombing effort from the Israelis up until that point, none of their aid will go away whatsoever. And that is so telling. And the pressures on these organizations are just a small sliver of what happens in regard to the pressures against government officials to toe the pro-Israel, Israel first line. So Max is 100% right here.
On the grounds that it's sensitive material, while showing pornography freely. You can see it on Twitter X with the click of a button. They would need to invest the foreign ministry's budget of $150 million for the year of 2025 for Hasbara, or propaganda, inside the United States. The Israeli government has just taken out a $4.5 million contract with a lobbying firm to attempt to hack the brains of evangelical Christians going to church in 4 major Western metropolises: Las Vegas, Phoenix, the Los Angeles area, and Denver. And evangelical churches in these areas will be offered a partnership program to geofence their church area, meaning that all church goers will have their phones flooded with ads and programming by the Israeli government through this lobbying firm,
Yeah, this sounds like a conspiracy theory, but this is exactly true. Take a look at this story. It's actually not 4.5 million, it's 4.1 million. But they're going to flood these people's phones in major metropolises in the US, Christians that are going to church, with this pro Zionist propaganda, the ads and images from October 7th that's supposed to, really captivate their spirits as they kill massive amounts of people in Gaza. And it's just sinister. I mean, it's explicitly pro-Israel and anti-Palestinian propaganda. So Max is right. You might think this is a conspiracy theory, but Max is exactly right here too. This is not an overstatement whatsoever.
Promoting Israeli tourism, and they will be given virtual reality October 7th experiences inside the church. And then their phones will be targeted with ads as they leave, just simply for entering this geo-fenced area. It's an unbelievable psychological attack on American evangelical Christians, which I think will produce more alienation. Brad Parscale, Trump's former campaign manager, has been given $1.5 million a month in a foreign agent contract from Israel to not just recruit influencers, but to game the language models of ChatGPT and other AI mechanisms in favor of Israel to essentially Zionize the algorithm. I don't know how they're going to do that. They're also paying influencers, a very small coterie of influencers who are positioned as sort of anti-woke influencers because the problem is now on the right. They're paying them anywhere between $6,100 to $7,100 per post to do propaganda posts in support of Israel.
Yeah, that's the new scam. That's the new scheme to pay influencers because the actual arguments are not winning out in the pro-Zionist cause. It's not swaying, especially younger people who use a lot of social media in this way. They have to pay these influencers $7,000 per post to make these propaganda pitches, and we've seen some of them come out. They're foolish and absurd, but the exposure of this story might drive this and swing this in an opposite direction when it's so astroturfed and manufactured and just so fake and phony that people see this and what Israel is doing and Israel's friends, to finance this stuff, and it's just garbage. All this while Netanyahu pleads, this hall of influencers to say, hey, we need to talk to Elon Musk, and the implication meaning that, yeah, we need to censor Americans that are critical of Israel on X. Let's talk to Elon Musk. He's not an adversary. He's a friend. Maybe we'll get this. That was the implication of what he was saying there. And let's hope this Larry Ellison deal goes through and to purchase TikTok. You know why? They didn't exactly like the images and videos coming out of Gaza that showed the truth, the atrocities against children, as Max put it, the shredding of children being pulled up from the rubble. Not exactly pretty, nice things when you're trying to focus on the prioritization of issues to you and what's important to you. Dead children, it's not something that you want taxpayers to finance, but too late, that's what the U.S. is doing. This isn't the only time it's done that. It's done that in the entire war on terror, and that's just more recently than all the other fruitless wars this country and this criminal government has engaged in. But Max is exactly right. Charlie Kirk had had enough. I didn't fully see the picture, and I wasn't fully persuaded that he was that far until these revelations, these 48 hours in advance revelations that said in no uncertain terms that he had no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause. And Hammer and the others can try to spin this any direction they want, but they're not saying these screenshots are fake. They can't say they're fake. The Qatari Photoshop, absurd explanation is dead. TPUSA has confirmed them. Andrew Kolvitz confirmed them. There's no way to hide from this. And this is a story regarding this circumstance and Israel's influence in our government and in our organizations, regardless of whether or not you think Israel had a hand in his murder. Certainly so. I agree with Max. I don't have any evidence to suggest that, but it is weird that Josh Hammer is tweeting for public execution being based the night before his friend is publicly executed without any explanation from Hammer, the constant lies from people like Hammer, and the spinsters on this. I don't think they can come back from this, man. I don't think that they can salvage this in any way. So We'll see what happens. I'm glad for Max's reporting. Dialogue works. Excellent interview. Please let me know what you think about this. Does this show a major story, a turn away from Israel? And is this a story regarding the pressures and influence of the pro-Israel propagandists? Let me know down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Dialogue Works. Awesome channel. Nima's an awesome guy. And thanks, Max, for this interview. If you like this commentary and this video, please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support my channel. It would mean the world to me. That would help me greatly to support this effort. And in return for that, I'll give you access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.